Hi everyone, happy Sunday, and welcome to video 1 of, let's call it episode 1. Welcome to episode 1 of letting Instagram followers choose my next reads. I originally was going to do this as one video, but then because of the amount of suggestions I got, I realized that if I want to do this in a span of a week, I would literally have to read probably 24/7, and still then I would not be able to get through all the books. So I think I'm going to break it down into parts. I do know which one I want to start with, and I'm going to start with Headshot, which was recommended to me by Poison Apple Library. I'm going to put the Instagram here. I'm really excited to start with this book. It's a sports drama, and it's actually quite short, so I just feel like I could get this done quite quickly, and it's going to set me on a good note for the rest of this series. It is also so gloomy today. It is freezing rain, so I am just really excited to get into this. Let's go somewhere comfier. Okay, this is more like it. So I'm going to start reading this book, and then I will let you know what my first initial thoughts are. So first initial thoughts, I'm on page 11. I think the book is great so far. I'm just not used to this style of writing. For example, it'll be like, Artemis Victor is rolling her shoulders. Artemis Victor has no idea what it takes to own a home. Artemis Victor is also a vegan. I get that this is just like the style of the writing. So we'll see how I feel about it down the line. But other than that, page 1 hooked me right away, and I'm enjoying it. Okay, so I just skipped ahead a bit because I was curious what the chapter structure was going to be in this book. And it looks like there's no chapters, but it's just going to be parts. The part I'm on now is between Andy and Artemis, who I'm assuming the next part is about 2 other boxers or maybe like a different tournament. So that's also going to be interesting because I'm typically a fan of short chapters. Quarter-way check-in, I guess. I just finished part 1, Andy versus Artemis. I like the kind of chaosness where we're going back and forth between both of the characters' stories and thoughts. So I think I'm going to read one more part because since this book is around 200 pages, I'm going to assume that there's going to be 4 parts to it. The one thing about filming for TikTok and YouTube is that I keep forgetting to film YouTube clips, but I am on part 3 of this book, so I did quite a bit of reading today. I am almost at the halfway mark, and I will say that I am liking this book, but I'm not loving this book. I feel like it's reminding me a bit of what it was like to read Beartown. I grew up like watching hockey. I still like to watch like a hockey game, but I don't know much about like the hockey culture. And Beartown, I feel like, taught me a lot about it, but it made me really interested and I wanted to read more about it, and I felt like connected to the sport. Whereas this book, which is about boxing, the more I'm reading about it, the more I'm still not that interested in boxing, so it might just be like an interest thing. I'm reading this, I'm reading all the insights, I'm still not like, wow, you know? However, I feel like the story itself is really dramatic. I like how we're getting the backstories of all of these boxers. I like the format of the book in terms of breaking it down to parts. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about that. So each kind of part is a different match. So each section is about like 40-50 pages, which just feels like a really long chapter. Honestly, I'm kind of liking it. And I feel like it makes me feel like I'm going through the book quite fast because I'm reading it in parts. I would say as of now, I would give the book like a 3.5 out of 5.
The next day.
And I started to think I might listen to it as an audiobook for the rest of the book because it's in third person. I feel like this is the perfect chance for me to get into audiobooks because I feel like third person stories will be better as audiobooks. So I'm gonna have a cozy night in color. It says I have about like 3 hours of listening. So let's see if we can get it done tonight.
A purple stain on and above her lip.
So I just finished Izzy Lang versus Iggy Lang. I will say though, I feel like this was like the worst chapter to listen to because the names were so similar. I think we could finish this tonight.
Had looked like one of Reno's parents. Was Las Vegas Reno's mom. To open the dome, Rachel Dorico pushes to prepare her plate. Rachel Dorico.
The next day.
This chair is squeaky, so if you hear little squeaky sounds, it's the chair. I'm going to give a spoiler warning. This series, I'm going to be really deep diving into these books. If you want just a more spoiler-free review, go to my Instagram and TikTok because I didn't really like spoil anything there. I just kind of shared personal thoughts after reading the book. But for YouTube, I'm actually going to be talking in depth about the book. So if you don't like things being spoiled, then come back once you read the book. So let's dive deep into this book. I think you could tell from my initial reaction that I was enjoying the book, and honestly, I thought I was going to enjoy it a bit more. Here's the thing. So I think in theory, Headshot, the story was there. I think the way it was formatted was interesting. I liked how each kind of part was a different matchup. I thought that was a really fun way to break up this book. I never personally got used to the point of view it was written in, and it just made me realize that I never really read books that are in third person, and that's why it felt so unnatural for me to read. Let's dive into it. So the first part was Andy and Artemis, and I liked their part a lot. I feel like both of the characters were different enough that I was able to kind of form these thoughts and opinions on both these characters. And this is going to be a common theme for each part, but I guess I'll just dive into it right now. The one issue I had with this book was that I feel like there could have just been more character development. I feel like the foundation was there, and I really liked the way each character was set up, but I want to know more about their lives. And I feel like the book focused a bit more on like the boxing side of things, which makes sense because the book is about boxing. So that's why it's not really like a con. It's more, that was just more of a personal preference. So I thought that dropping Andy's lore and the way that they were kind of hinting, well, not hinting, they were telling us about the kid that she witnessed die at the pool that she worked at. I was waiting for kind of more of a reveal of like what the heck that situation was, and we never got that. And I feel like, I don't know if that was the author's intent, just to kind of keep us on our toes or keep it more ominous, but I feel like kind of starting the book that way and then never really wrapping that up felt kind of, I don't know, I felt disconnected from that. Artemis, I really liked. I could picture Artemis really well and her family. I feel like they built up that character well. I think there's just room for more development in the characters. I found that by the end of the book, it's not that I didn't like the characters, I just didn't feel like any connection toward like any of the characters by the end, which I think is fine. It's not that it made the reading less enjoyable. I just feel like in the long run, when I think back, this one just might not stand out the most to me because I just didn't feel that like deep connection with the characters. Moving on to the part 2, so that was Rachel and Kate. Again, I think the foundation was there. They were different enough, but again, I don't know, there was a disconnect. I couldn't relate to really either of them. I think at this point of the book, I realized that I'm also maybe just not that into boxing. And hear me out. Headshot kind of reminded me of how I felt after reading Atmosphere, which I know Atmosphere is super loved by many people. And I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think her writing is incredible. And that's my point, is that when I finished Atmosphere, like looking at the book, I knew that it was obviously a very well-written book. I loved the character development and I loved the story, but it all just came down to I don't really care that much about space. And obviously like 40% of the book is about space, so that obviously skewed my own personal opinions. But then if I was actually just looking at the book from more of a technical standpoint, then it's more of a 4-star read. However, I think I ended up giving Atmosphere a 3.75, which is what I ended up giving Headshot, because it just came down to personal preference, which I don't think is a bad thing. This is why I like to also say that I don't think 3-star reads are bad. I know that's a controversial take and like some authors or people will think that, but I like to mention that I don't think they're bad because I don't want to ever like offend authors or anything. It was more just a personal thing, and that's how I always will rate books, because I don't know, I'm just sharing my own personal reading experience, and I also don't want to be scared to share my opinions. We need to continue sharing our real opinions to keep the authenticity in this kind of community, but also there's a way to do it. I like to think that the way I review books is coming from just like personal experience and nothing, and I'm not ripping apart like the hard work that went into books, if that makes sense. So then the next part gets kind of interesting, because I started to think that since the book was written in third person, maybe this would be a really good opportunity to listen to it as an audiobook, because it's like someone's telling me a story. I started to listen to it as an audiobook and actually didn't struggle with it as much as I thought. I think I've talked about this many times on YouTube, but in case you're new here, I don't have anything against audiobooks. I think it's an ADHD thing. When I listen to podcasts, always have to watch the video version, and I think it's just because I need to see people talking, because my mind, I feel like, can wander a lot more easily. Audiobooks have always just been really hard. I've never been able to get through a whole audiobook, but I successfully got through Headshot, and to be fair, it was only the second half of the book that I listened to, but it was a really good experience, and I am excited to listen to more audiobooks. I will say though, the chapter that I started on when I started listening to it as an audiobook was probably the worst chapter to start on. It was the matchup between the cousins Izzy and Iggy. So listening to that, because their names are so similar sounding and also they had the same last name, it was kind of hard for me to differentiate the two. And I also feel like their personalities, out of all the matchups, they were obviously different people, but like I feel like there wasn't enough about both of them that it was easy for me to differentiate both of them, which made listening to it, I had to like really focus on that. But I liked their chapter, and then the final one I also thought was fine. Overall, I think this book had really good messaging in it. I thought it had some really good insights. I did learn things about the boxing world too that I would have never known about. I learned about how like the different points could work. I also kind of learned more about the culture of women's boxing, which I honestly love to learn about new things like that, and I'm all for women in sports. I think it's great that we have books like this to empower women. I think the book itself was beautifully written. There was a lot of sentences in here that I'm like, wow, this was like very beautiful, very poetic. But overall, I give it a strong 3.75, which I think is a really fair review, considering again the topics of it just weren't particularly my favorite. From a book standpoint, if I'm looking at it without kind of my personal bias, I think it was a solid read, and I think there would be a lot of people out there that would really like this book, and I would recommend it to anyone that likes a sports drama. Let me know if you have read it or if it's on your TBR, and if you end up reading it, come back to this video and let's talk about it, because I haven't seen that many people talking about this book online. But again, I want to say thank you, Poison Apple Library, for recommending me this book. She actually recommended me 2 books for this series, and the next one I think is like a paranormal like horror story, which I'm extremely excited to read. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed episode 1, and I think the way I'm going to do this series is either maybe a weekly thing or a monthly thing, because I did get quite a few suggestions. I know I didn't want to do this whole series in a row because there's lots of books I want to read in between. So maybe I'll do it as like a monthly or maybe a bi-weekly thing. I'm sure you'll see episode 2 in the coming weeks, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye.